Hey there everyone, this is Jeremy, the Music Andy, and we're here today to talk about Tell Me That It's Over from Wallows. This is indie pop, indie rock coming from Los Angeles, California. This is album number 2 for the three-piece. They were known for a little bit of a post-punk revival kind of sound in their last album, but they're kind of scrapping that away for a little bit of noise and a little bit of ruggedness, lo-fi-ness into this new album. This band is typically known for kind of creating some nice, warm feeling vibes, some danceable tracks. The hit song, Are You Bored Yet? Kind of displays that. It was a huge song that blew up. Everybody knows it. It's got about 500 million views on Spotify. It was floaty. It was super warm, like I was saying. It had some very nice, bright tones. And again, it just had some nice, decent progressions and song structuring to it. And I thought it was a pretty solid track from the band for being a big radio hit. That's the past though. Let's talk about the present, and that is Tell Me That It's Over. Hard to Believe is the starting track on this one, and it is a lot more looser in production than the previous works. Sometimes it goes a little bit overproduced, sometimes it has a little bit more of a lo-fi feel to it. The production on this album for the most part is all over the place. The instrumentation on this track and on other tracks, not so much on the back end, is very busy. It's very noisy. There's a lot of different instruments going on here. There's a lot of very harsh tones going on here. The moments leading up to these boiling points and explosions of sounds really kind of feel forced. It doesn't feel very momentous building. It doesn't feel like a true progression of the track that starts off and then where it ends up. The use of strings that was on this track, though, were very welcome. I thought they were done very well. If those were the instruments that were just kind of being introduced and played with on the track, I think that this would be a very solid track. But those harsh tones, those noise moments, again, they just felt a little unnatural. They didn't feel very organic, and it kind of has this track lacking a little bit. The melodies that's on this track, and a lot of the melodies that are going to be going forward on this album, are your pretty standard indie feelings. A lot of ebb and flow, ups and downs, quiet to loud moments, really kind of having those sugar-coated, very catchy candy-like choruses, those hooks. For the most part, it feels like a lot of these tracks have been done by other bands, but they're gonna just stack so much instrumentation that it's gonna be very unrecognizable to your ears. It's going to sound like a very fresh listen, but it's really not too much of a fresh listen. Again, it just feels very unnatural. And like I was saying, this is a common theme that is going to be throughout this album. Again, not so much on the back end. The back end is a lot more reserved. The front half is, we're going to play a standard indie song. We're going to stack it full of a bunch of jambles of instruments, and we're going to see if it sticks. And some of them do stick, to be honest with you. I will say, though, that something I was impressed with on this album is just the overall feeling of the drums throughout each track. The drums are super trashy. They're very fuzzy. They're very, distorted in sounding. They're not clean at all. And I think that if the band wanted to go into a more noisy direction, that just having the drums do it was going to be good enough for it. And it does add a very nice contrast to it. But with all of these instruments going on, with the heavy effects being the thing that's really catching your ears, these drums get lost a lot. The rhythms that are being played with are kind of lost into the sound, and it's a damn shame. Despite this album being very, overproduced, having a little bit too much going on, I did say that there were a few tracks on this one that really do stick out from the rest of them. Those tracks being Hard to Believe, Missing Out, Marvelous. Missing Out is the one that I thought was the best track on this one, and it kind of seems to be in agreement with the rest of the community from what I'm seeing. The hyperpop vocals that are in Missing Out kind of help tie in all of this frenzying and noisy environment that's going on. When you have the classic indie, very soft, kind of emo guiding vocals, and then you mix it with the noisy nonsense that's kind of going on in a lot of this instrumentation, it's a bit too much of a big contrast, and I do love contrast in my music. It's probably the thing that I look for most, but when it's too much and it doesn't really have any of these pieces connecting to each other, you can kind of get lost. Missing Out doesn't do this at all, and again, going back to those hyperpop vocals, the synth that comes on this, that's super noisy, it's a wonk-ass synth, and it sounds great, especially paired next to those hyperpop vocals. I wish that this was the direction that the band went with a little bit more. Instead of sticking in that indie realm that they kind of locked themselves into, if you add in a lot of more of the genres tying in with this noise element that you're trying to add on, you're going to have a much more complete album, and everything is going to kind of flow a little bit better from track to track. After Missing Out, we have 3 more tracks, and these 3 tracks are not bad tracks by any means. They just feel very odd on this album that has been created so far. Wallows is going for this new wave synth pop approach on Hurts Me. It is done all right. I'm a sucker for a slap and pluck bass, and even that wasn't enough to really kind of grab me into this track. It felt a little bit uninspired. It felt like a lot of songs that were going on in the 80s and are kind of being mimicked into the newer sounds of modern music. That's what I get. Really isn't a bad track. I think it is a very solid track, and if you put it on another album and you mix it with a lot of them that sound like it, I think that this would be a pretty solid album altogether. But this album it is very aggressive, it's very brash, it has very harsh moments, and this track kind of eliminates that at all, and it just goes for that much more gentle, softer approach that either the band should have stuck with that, or they shouldn't have really done it at the end of the album. Then we have the ending track, which is much more slower. It's jammier. It has a nice ebb and flow into it. It's got soft pianos, acoustic guitars, twink boys singing their feelings. This is your classic indie song. We've heard it probably 300 times, but it still isn't a bad track, and it does a good job of ending it. But again, it is a little bit contrasting to the rest of the album. But at least it went with the next 3 that ended it. Overall, I felt this was an album that had eyes bigger than its stomach. They chewed off a little bit more than they could swallow. They were going for some noise, some experimental on the tones, but I wish that they were just a little bit more experimental on their progressions, their transitions, the song structuring. Again, things just felt a little bit too forced and just, hey, we're just going to throw a lot of instruments on this because people like busy instruments now in modern music. I like the old post-punk revival sound that they had going on. I know it's a genre that kind of gets shit on a little bit. I like traditional post-punk a lot. I like that sound, but there's nothing wrong with post-punk revival. Interpol and Block Party sound great. Wallows sounded fine when they were doing it. They had some nice tones going on, and they had some nice song structuring as well. I'm thinking 5.4 kitchen sinks out of 10 on this one. What did you think of this album? What albums would you like me to review in the future? Please leave a comment below and let me know. Subscribe if you like the content, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.